Alright, so we are now moving on to section 9.1 on how do I measure. Specifically, this is geometry. We're going to look at basic geometry. So hopefully, as we go through the lessons here in 9.1, some of this stuff will come back to you that you've learned it in some previous math classes. So hopefully, this will actually be one of the sections that things start to click. Oh yeah, I remember this from, way back when. Alright, so we start off with the basics. The basics are your basic geometric shapes. We'll start with rectangles, circles, and triangles, and then we will get into some more three-dimensional shapes as well later. Alright, so first, rectangles. Alright, so rectangles, again, are, we have four sides. They're, again, right angles on each of the sides. And so rectangles will have a length and a width. Sometimes we say base and height, but we try to stick to length as one of the sides and width as one of the sides. And so there's two things that we're going to be looking for in rectangles. We want to find the perimeter and the area. So if you remember, perimeter means the distance around. And so we want to know, well, suppose this was a fence. We want to know the distance around. All right, so we're finding the entire length of the rectangles. And so what it turns out, well, there's two sides that are the length L and two sides that are the length W. And so when we find the perimeter, it is just adding up all of the sides. And so it would be L plus L, which is where the 2L comes from, W plus W, which is where the 2W comes from. And so it is two lengths plus two widths, and that's how we find the perimeter. It's the distance around any shape. So it's just literally adding up every single side to a shape, and we will get more complex and ugly looking shapes later on. All right, but that's the idea behind a perimeter. All right, the next thing is the area. Area is what the shape encompasses. So when you go in a house and there's an area rug, right? You have a rug. Well, it's the entire space that the rug takes up. And so the area is all of this. This is the area of the figure that I'm looking for. So it's the entire space the shape takes up. And so for a rectangle, we want to find the area. Well, as it turns out, area of a rectangle is length times width. So we multiply the length times the width, and that will give us the area. And the area, since it's length times width, the units for area is squared, because it would be feet times feet, so we get feet squared. Whereas perimeter is just adding it up, so it would be just feet if we're doing feet. All right, so let's do an example. All right, find the perimeter and the area of the rectangle given below. And you don't have to memorize the formulas, although these should be pretty standard formulas. The formulas are given to you here in the notes. Also, if you go look at that formula sheet from, the general formula sheet for the entire class, the second page has all of the formulas for this section. So we're going to, again, like I said, start with rectangles. We'll get to circles, triangles, and then later on we'll get to some more complex shapes. So all of the formulas are there. You just have to know how and where to use them. Alright, so the first formula is the perimeter and area of a rectangle. Alright, so the perimeter is the distance around. And so, again, remember the length and width. There are two of them. This side has a length 3, this side has a length 7. And so you could, if you wanted to find the perimeter, I'm going to use capital P for perimeter, you could just add them all up. 3 plus 3 plus 7 plus 7, it would give you the same answer. Or use the formula. Perimeter is there are two lengths, 2 7s, and 2 widths, 2 3s. And it gives you the exact same answer. Right? There's 2 of each of the sides. And so 2 times 7, which would be 14, plus 2 times 3, which would be 6. And so it adds up to 20. And again, the units on it would be feet. There are 20 feet. If I walked this rectangular path, I would walk 20 feet. That would be the perimeter. All right, so the perimeter, now the area. All right, so again, the area is the entire shapes, what it takes up, the space it takes up, the area. And so area is length times width. In this case, my length is 7, my width is 3. And so area would be 7 times 3. And remember, these are feet times feet, so the units on it will be feet squared because it's 7 feet times 3 feet. And so when we multiply the 7 times 3, that's 21, and the units on it would be square feet. That's the entire area this shape encompasses, so 20 feet squared. All right, the next shape we're going to look at is circles. All right, circles. The formulas for circles are that you, again, will be given. They're either in this set of notes or, like I said, they're on the general class formula sheet. All right, the circumference is just a fancy word for perimeter of a circle. That's all the circumference is. Circumference is the distance around the circle. And so the circumference is, if I walked on this edge all the way around, that's the circumference. And oftentimes we use capital C to label the circumference. And the circumference turns out to be 2, and that symbol is pi. If you're not familiar with it, pi is an irrational number, and we will, since you are required to have a scientific calculator in this class, do not shorthand pi. Always use the pi key on your calculator or your whatever it is you're using as a calculator. All right, because if you use the shorthand for it, I'm not even going to say it, you will get significantly errors because it will round incorrectly. All right, that's why you're required to have a scientific calculator. You have to use the pi key. All right, so 2 pi r. The r stands for the radius. The radius is the distance from the center of the circle to the side of the circle. That's what the radius is, the distance from the center of the circle, so this would be the center, to the edge, right? And if you draw a circle, if you've ever drawn a circle using a compass, that's how you draw a circle, right? You put the middle of the compass there, however far out the radius is, you mark it there, and then you draw it around, all right? And that drawing distance is the circumference, all right? So the radius is r, the distance between the center and the edge. The diameter is often given. Diameter would be the total distance across. So if I were going to draw the diameter of this shape, it would go from one edge through the center to the other. And it does have to go through the center, so I could draw it many different ways, but it does have to cut through the center. And so the diameter is 2 radiuses, all right? Twice the radius, because it's a radius on both sides, right? This would be a radius here, this would be a radius here. And so the diameter is 2 times the radius. So if we're given diameter, and both of my formulas have a radius in it, right? Circumference is 2 times pi times radius. Area of my circle is pi times radius squared. Well, I have to find the radius by dividing by 2. All right, so if my if my diameter was 20, I would take 20 divided by 2, and that would give me my radius 10. All right, and so again, circumference is the perimeter of the circle, the distance around the circle. Area, just like the area of a rectangle, would be the space that the circle takes up. So again, the area is all of this. This is the area, and so area is the space the shape takes up. So again, if you had a circle-sized rug, this would be the space that rug takes up. So that would be the area. So area, again, units are always squared, right? Because we're taking our radius, our distance radius, squaring it. So if radius was in inches, it'd be inches squared. All right, circumference would be distance around, so that's just inches. All right, so let's do a few examples. I will do an example of one of each case. So one where we're given the radius, one where we're given the diameter. All right, so the first circle, we want to find both the area and the circumference. Remember, circumference is just a fancy term for the distance around my circle, my perimeter. And so the first circle has a radius of 4 inches. So again, the radius is what we want. That's the r in my formulas. And so when we go to find our circumference, remember the formula is given to you. You don't have to remember it, but it's 2 pi times the radius. And remember, you have to use the pi key on the calculator. And what I usually do, because we don't want to do anything, we don't want to do rounding in any problem until the very end of the problem. And so I'll often simplify it with pi, and then the very last thing I'll do is I'll multiply my number times pi using the key on the calculator. Alright, so in this case, my circumference is 2 times my radius, which is 4, And so if I take 2 times 4, that's 8 times pi. And so that's exactly what the distance around the circle is. And then you use your calculator, or whatever your graphing device that you're using, whatever your calculator device that you're using, make sure you use the scientific pi key on your calculator. Do not round to that. Use the exact pi. Alright, so take 8 times pi, and I'm going to round to 2 decimal places. So in this case, the circumference comes out to 5.38 inches. Alright, so if I were to walk around the circle, well, I couldn't really walk around it, but if I were to take my pencil and draw it around, I would draw a distance of about 25.13 inches. Alright, now the area of the circle. So area is pi times my radius squared. And so in this example, it's going to be pi times 4 squared. So I'm going to do the 4 squared first. So area is pi times 16, right? 4 squared is 16. And then I'm going to use the pi key on my calculator, or my calculating device, times my 16. And again, I'm around 2 decimal places. So I get 50.27. And remember, since we squared the 4 inches, this comes out inches squared. That's my area. 50.27 inches squared. The circumference, the distance around this particular circle, is 25.3. Alright, now the other circle. Alright, so looking at the other example. So this time, the problem gave us diameter. So remember, the diameter is the distance from one side of the circle to the other side of the circle, cutting through the center. Alright, so that would be the diameter. So the diameter is 10 feet. Well, we don't want the diameter, we want the radius. So the radius is 1/2 of that. And so the diameter is 10 feet. The radius is half of that. So you take your 10, divide by 2, and so that's going to come out 5 feet. So our radius of this circle is 5 feet. All right, now we can find our circumference. So 2 times pi times r. So in this case, 2 pi times 5. So again, I like to simplify. 2 times 5, which is 10. And then last thing, I get out my calculator and I take my 10 times 5. And again, I'm going to round 2 decimal places. So it comes out to be 31.42. And our units are feet. All right, now area. Area is pi radius squared. And so in this case, it will be pi times 5 squared. 5 squared is 25, and so I want to take 25 times pi. And so again, I get out my calculator and take my 25 times pi. If I round a couple of decimal places, it comes out 78.54, and now our units are square units, right, because we squared the feet. And so again, the entire area of the circle would be 78.54 feet squared. Alright, so we're going to stop there. I'm going to do application problems in the next video. So this was just introducing you to rectangles and circles, perimeter, and areas. And again, circumference is a perimeter. It's just the perimeter of a circle. Alright, stopping there.